Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart. In this video, I am going to be doing some fan art from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask in hopes that it gets accepted into the Summer Games Done Quick 2025 event as a prize incentive. I'm still waiting to hear back. I'm still crossing my fingers hoping, but if not, this was still so much fun to paint and definitely exercised parts of my art brain that I don't normally use. Just a heads up, I have sped this video up about 150% just to try and, I take this painting pretty slowly. So one of the first things that I've already done differently is I have sketched this out. And I have spared you from watching me sketch it, but I had rulers out and I was carefully measuring points of distance because this mask has a lot of like geometry to it. And in that case, I wanted it to be like not super precise, which is why I did hand drawing. Like the straight lines and stuff I didn't use my ruler for. I just used the ruler for measurements. But I still wanted it to be pretty precise, which is different for me. So one of the nice things about drawing things out is I can plan things really easily. So I can do like this wet into wet section and then move on to another section, let that dry, and dance around the painting in a way that I don't normally get to do, because normally I'm kind of planning the painting as I go. In this case, the painting's planned. I just gotta pop on an audiobook and let it do its thing. One of the things I love about this mask is the little spiky bits that come out are all beautiful gradients, which is perfect for watercolor's wet in wet technique. The paper I'm using is 11 by 14 Arches hot press paper. And I chose this because because of the way I'm painting this, where I'm painting it in little sections at a time. And I wanted to show off the luminosity of the paint. I didn't want a lot of granulation. And in that case, the smooth texture of the paper was perfect for this piece. Painting in the eyes, I used some cadmium medium yellow hue. And I'm outlining it with a medium red cadmium hue. And the majority of these paints are by Daniel Smith, though I also pull out some by Rockwell Art. I am not a purist by any means. I will use whatever colors work for my painting. Now I'm going in with a little bit of permanent alizarin crimson just to darken the outline of that eye. And again, this mask with all of its gradients was so perfect for wet in wet watercolor. All right, going in with some purple. This particular purple is a Rockwell Art paint, and this is Alexandra Diamond Purple. I picked it because it's a cooler purple, and it does have like blue undertones. And it just looked like the perfect color for this part of the mask. And this is all very much just the first wash or the first draft. So there's kind of some flat washes of color. I am wet into wet, dropping in some shadow areas. But don't judge, if you're painting, don't judge its shape so early on. With watercolor, usually there are layers involved to increase the depth, to shift the tone with glazing, and hot press paper is especially good for glazing. Hot press paper is very popular among botanical artists and people who paint portraits because you get those really soft, smooth transitions of gradients. And it works very well for doing many layers. Though, of course, in addition to your paper, you need to pay attention to the quality of your paint. For example, if you were to put down a layer of hematite genuine, you don't want to put anything else on top of it because the paint will lift right off. Now, another color that I am dropping into the purple to keep things from becoming too flat is also by Rockwell Art, and it is Cleopatra Green. And I use the green because it dulls down the purple, it deepens a shadow. And even though I'll be waiting to really pump things up after the first layer is dry, wet into wet is such a beautiful thing to do in watercolor. It really allows the pigment to shine in a way that you can't really do with other mediums. And so anytime you can utilize that technique, I say go for it. All right, now moving on to the lower spikes. A lot of yellow will be involved, but I'm going to take this moment to say that even if you're not really into video games, I would highly recommend donating to the cause, as this is benefiting Doctors Without Borders. I am not affiliated with GDQ or Doctors Without Borders, but I do love the cause. Dropping in one of my favorite colors now, and that is Paliba Diamond Blue, also by Rockwell Art. Dropping in some green. This particular green is called Ona Diamond Yellow. And I usually don't use so many colors in a piece. And that's because the way I usually paint is in these very grand, loose, atmospheric washes, but because this painting is far tighter with little segments, I can use a bunch of colors without fear of them becoming muddy. And for anyone wondering, the majority of this painting is done with my size 8 round brush by Silver Black Velvet. This is one of my favorite brushes because it holds a lot of water for its size, and it has a nice sharp tip. So it's a really good, like, multi-purpose brush. Now I'm lifting some of the paint off with my brush. So I'm having a clean, thirsty brush, and I'm just doing a swipe on those little spiky bits to create a bit of shine. In this case, the light is coming from the left. So I'm going to have light on the left, darker on the right, and that's how I'm placing my colors. Not just in terms of value, but even temperature. You know what, I'm going to use this minute to get on my soapbox again, because this painting, while later on, when I add the background, it does then fit nicely with the rest of my portfolio as a Valerie piece. But this is a different subject than what I usually paint, different colors than I would normally use, and the technique is wildly different than how I usually paint. And so often I hear from artists about like their signature style and how they have to stick with their signature style. Your signature style is just however you want to paint. And don't be afraid to experiment. That's part of how we continue to develop. This, I would say overall, is not at all in my signature style. Gosh, even just saying the words signature style. Just have fun. Paint however you want to paint. And a great way to branch out is by doing a charity piece like this. Because no one cares what my signature style is at this event. What do they care about? Donating to a good cause and watching games get broken and efficiently finished in the quickest way possible. They're not going to care that I sketched this first. They're going to see that it's Majora's Mask from a Legend of Zelda game, and that's cool. But Val, I can hear you saying on the other end, I'm not interested in video games. You know what? I gotcha. Don't worry. There are other ways to help out too. Maybe you like painting animals. Some shelters do things like, oh, there's one that's happening at my library. It's like Pause for a Cause, where you can paint animals to help them get adopted. There are all sorts of things. I bet if I just Googled it, I could come up with so many more. But I'm in the middle of recording this, so I'll leave that up to you. But it is a great way to branch out, maybe with a new subject matter or a new painting matter. Because I'm not submitting this to a gallery. I'm not submitting this to any art shows. I am having fun, sharing something that I enjoy with other people who enjoy it even more than I do. And being able to use my talents in a community where I can't really do very much otherwise. I am terrible at video games, no matter how hard I try. But art can really branch us together. And really look at how much fun it is to paint those gradients. Oh, it's so bright and colorful. And even though I'm recording this long after this has been finished painting, just seeing this come together again is like raising my dopamine levels. And this painting took me, well, let's see, unedited footage was over an hour, not including sketching time. So on one hand, this painting took me a little longer than most of them do, but on the other hand, this painting really didn't take very long at all if you think about it. So one thing I do appreciate about this piece is it forced me to slow down. I tend to fall into the trap of, oh, it's a watercolor, I have to paint it quickly. But with the way that this was segmented, it allowed me to just sit back, pop on that audiobook, and just let the color flow. Okay, all the spikes are done, and that purple is dry, so I'm gonna go in with some orange. This orange is Aussie Red Gold by Daniel Smith, and I'm just going to paint that upper portion of the mask. Now, pretty soon I will be putting some detail on, and I will have noticed that I kind of messed up a little bit on the placement of those upper spikes in relation to the orange. And at that point, I'll just use a little bit of artistic liberty and switch things up a bit, and no one has to know. Well, now you know, but only the people who watch this video or have attention to detail will know. Going in with a really teeny tiny brush and adding a little bit of shadow to that spike to separate it from the mask. Because yellow against orange, not a lot of value difference there, so just a little line breaks it up. And I don't outline the whole thing, just a little bit. Our brains can fill in the rest of the information. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I am getting some really hard watermarks on a few spots of this painting, but I'm particularly seeing it on that first patch of orange on the top of the mask. That will drive some people crazy. Oh, I mean, artists. I don't know how many people who enjoy art are driven crazy by that. I think many almost expect to see that in watercolor, which has me continue with, that is a watercolor thing, and I personally love it. It shows that this is a watercolor piece, and I love when those weird texture lines pop up unintentionally. It's like it's helping me create more visual interest without me actually having to plan it out. Right, giving the eye another pass. I have glazed just some clean water on it so that I can once again paint wet into wet. It is a slightly different effect than if I had gone in the first time. But if you had something like this happen where the transition from the red to the yellow is just too harsh, just cover that area in water and then dot in your pigment, and you'll still get that wet into wet look. And don't be afraid to go strong. Watercolor's transparent, and it does dry paler than when you put it down. Sometimes like up to 50% paler, depending on how strongly you put it down. So if you put something down and you're like, oh, that color's perfect, it's not. Go a little darker. And ultimately, I know a lot of people don't like hearing the whole, well, how do you learn how to paint this? Oh, you just gotta practice. But I can give the tips, but really, you'll just have to get a feel for it, because different paints, different pigments, and honestly, different climates will give you different results. I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's fairly cool here. I live by the sea. It's fairly humid, but not in an icky way, but it does let my paints stay wet longer. But if you live in like somewhere very dry and windy, your effects will be very different from mine. And so, as frustrating as it can be sometimes to hear, well, you just gotta practice. Sometimes you just gotta practice. And in this case, I have pulled out red. On the camera, it looks like I'm using the permanent alizarin crimson because it's cooler than the cadmium. And then I'm dropping in some other color. I think I'm dropping in the Cleopatra green. And I'm doing that because green is the opposite of red. And so it'll like tone down that red. So I would recommend, if you want to tone down an area, use the complement color. But not all complement colors work together super well, which comes again to practicing and knowing your pigments. So permanent alizarin crimson is a cooler red, and Cleopatra green is a cool green. Cool colors will typically mix pretty well together. You want to mix a warm with a warm. If you mix a warm with a cool, it's more likely to come out dull and muddy. But again, not every time. That's why it's good to practice. And if you're unsure, practice on a scrap piece of paper first. Another thing I can hear some people maybe saying is, well, then how do I make purple? Because blue is a cool color and red is warm. Yeah, but some reds are cool, some blues are warm. And so just mixing any red with any blue won't give you the purple you want. And I'm someone who buys way too many tubes of paint anyway. I'm just going to go straight for a purple. Going in with a little more red because I want the red of the mask to be bolder. And if anyone needs an audiobook recommendation, I've got a few. While I'm painting this piece, I am listening to Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, I believe. And the audiobook was fantastic, so well done. And it's a horror, but like dark academia and a bit of a teenage love story. And it really leaves you guessing. I loved it. And apparently the physical book has like actual sketches and drawings in it. So I might have to check that out too. All right, I pulled out a small flat brush and I don't even remember exactly which pigment I picked up, probably the Cleopatra green, but I'm doing it at such an intense value that it looks black. And in order to get that value, I've basically like rubbed my brush against the paint in my palette and haven't mixed a lot of water with it, just enough to get the paint to move, but not enough to dilute it. All right, going in now, the area around the eye is very dark, so I'm using a deep dark value. I'm pretty sure this is Cleopatra green, but it's been long enough since I painted this that I'm not really sure. But what is most important is getting your value correct. I could go in with a purple, and as long as it is the correct value, it's fine. So at this point in the painting, I don't want to be pulling in a lot of new colors, so anything that I do pick is going to be from something I've already used. And same thing on the other side. Another audiobook recommendation. If you want something that's a little cozier, maybe you're not into horror, then I would recommend Legends and Lattes. That one's really well done, and it is cozy. It's like a D&D book, but it's not about a bunch of fighting and glory and weapons. It's about an orc who is opening up a coffee shop, and in this area, coffee is kind of unheard of. Everyone drinks tea. And like a baker gets brought in, and it makes me very hungry when the food is described. But if you want something a little more cozy, Legends and Lattes. Fantastic story to listen to while painting. All right, the mask face is dry enough, and I'm going in and painting the small dots. I did not sketch the dots out. I figured that it'd be easy enough for me to wing it. And then I found out that I didn't quite get things quite centered enough, and watercolor can be considered unforgiving due to you can't really paint over it with it being transparent. But if it's still wet and you notice you do something wrong, pull out a paper towel and just dot it off. Now there is, you can see, remnant from where I did put those dots down. But that's okay. Let the area dry, or in my case, don't, because I'm silly, and just move the dots over. And because of that value shift, the eyes will go to the darker spots and isn't really going to pay attention that maybe there's a bit of an outline elsewhere. But also because the dots shifted ever so slightly, those outlines actually helped give it a more 3D look. And that was completely unintentional. I made a mistake. And it actually made my painting better. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's pretty cool. Going in with that flat brush again, and a deep, dark value, painting in some of the details of the mask. Grabbing one of my favorite brushes, it's a size 3 synthetic, a Da Vinci Cosmo top spin, and I'm using that to outline some areas. And one thing I love about that brush in particular is the handle is very comfortable to hold. Going in again, just enjoying myself, and being very careful not to put my hand on wet paint, which is a bit of a problem I typically have. So just be very careful. Whenever you're doing detail work, there is the desire to rest your wrist on the painting. And I can't judge. I do it, but try to make sure wherever you're about to put your hand is dry. Now outlining around the eyes, or I guess the entire eye socket area. And it's so cool how adding the details really starts to bring things together. A testament to don't judge a painting too early. Right, adding a wash to the purple part of the mask again. I didn't think that the value was dark enough, so a similar technique that I used on the eyeballs, where I wet an area and then dot in some color. And there I just went in wet into dry. I didn't even bother wetting the paper in that spot. And sometimes I'll admit it's a bit, I don't want to use the word scary, but a bit scary where you've painted something, you've spent a lot of time on it, and you now have to decide, well, do I want to make this painting even better by adding a greater range of values to give it more depth and form? And the answer is yes, of course. But then there's that, oh, well, what if it doesn't come out right? What if I ruin it? I have painted enough paintings to say that if you think that you need to push an area darker to make it better, you're probably right. Nothing brings out the light in watercolor like adding some dark. All right, I think I've actually pulled out, I think this might be called obsidian? Yeah, obsidian brown. And I need to cover the background quickly. So I've pulled out this kind of random cat's tongue brush I have. I picked that particular one because it's very soft, but it has like a point on it, because normally I would just use a mop brush, but also normally if I'm going to paint a funky background, I paint that first. So I'm definitely doing things differently than I normally would at this point. And I did do a quick thumbnail sketch before going in to make sure I would put like my dark tones where I wanted them, how I wanted to fade them away, but I also didn't want it, I'm okay with some streakiness, but I didn't want it to be too streaky, you know, like as if it was unplanned and timid, kind of streaky. But also I want to be careful and carefully outline. This is called negative painting, where you're painting around your subject. And I do love how it turns out, but at the time I was starting to worry, like, oh no, I spent all of this time on the mask. Now I'm adding a background and what am I doing? But I mean, you saw the thumbnail, you see how this came together, so it's all fine. But sometimes there is that element of trust that you have to have in yourself and in the paint. Trust the paint. But of course, I dropped in a lot of that Palaiba Diamond Blue because I don't want like just a flat, streaky, kind of grungy black background. I do want there to be some color, some life. And I'm still pulling color that I've used in the piece. It's like right there, dropped in a little bit of purple. And I am going to have this kind of be like much darker in that upper left corner and slowly get lighter as it goes through the piece. Everything was looking a little too cool to me. I wanted to drop in a little bit of Aussie red gold, and it doesn't look vibrantly orange because, I mean, I dropped it on its complement and on a really dark kind of dingy color. But dark dingy colors have their place too. They allow the things that are nice and vibrant and bold to therefore look even more eye-catchingly vibrant. But Polybediamond Blue is like my favorite color, so I have to use it. It's like a rule. And don't get too fidgety with the wash that you're putting down, because the more fiddly you get, the more it's likely to look like you were unsure and like you were making a mistake. So even if you are unsure of what you've done, typically the best thing to do is to leave it alone. And if you want to adjust things when it's dry, that's actually a much better time to do so. I mean, obviously, sometimes things happen. You can see, oh, there's a line here and my paint's still wet. I can fix this. Oh, definitely do that. But for example, if I was unsure about dropping in that orange up there, maybe it's too distracting or too muddy, now's not the time to fix it. It's already in that weirdly dry portion where if I try to do something, I'm just going to call more attention to it. Now, ultimately, I don't fix it because it doesn't need to be fixed. I think it's great. But that's just a bit of advice, is it's in that case going to be better if you want to make a change, let it dry first. And also sometimes things look a little weird when they're wet, but once they dry, it's like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty great. Doing a little bit of splatter, adding some more texture. And I do have this at an angle. Not a very extreme angle, maybe like 15 degrees if I were to guess degrees. But having it at an angle does allow the paint to flow downwards, even if very slowly. But I like that kind of drippy effect. And then I can also just lift the board up if I feel like I want the pigments to run back a bit. But look at the splatter that I put on earlier. It's all now diffused into that wet wash, but in a way that I'm really happy with. Working on the other side of the mask, notice that the value is much lighter on the right than it is on the left. And I'm bringing in more of that Aussie red gold, one to connect it to the left, but also this side's going to be lighter, so I'm going to use not just lighter values, but lighter colors in general. And I don't know what it is, but I am a bit of a sucker for the orange and blue complementary color scheme. So I've lifted up my board. I am now dotting in some more of a darker value of pigment. Not everywhere. I do want it to kind of flow away, but in order to make that mask pop out more, I didn't want like mid-tone against mid-tone. That starts to have things blend together too much. Blending together a bit in certain areas is fine. It can create the illusion of lost and found. But like I said earlier about if you feel like you need to make something darker to help another part pop, go darker. And that's what I did there with the mask, is just adding in a few dots of more concentrated pigment to bring out that brighter yellow and that brighter orange. Now I've got that Polybediamond Blue on the left, I'm bringing it in on the right, but I'm using it more watered down so it's a lighter value. And I just love these rough watermarks that are coming in. I find that hot press paper is great for getting those like classic hard watercolor marks. Dropping in some of that Polybediamond Blue, because it's really going to help make that orange and the yellow pop on those little spiky bits. And a little bit got onto the spikes, and so I just grabbed my paper towel because those spike areas are dry and just lifted the paint. And then adding some orange splatter on the lower corner. Okay, background is dry and I love how it's looking. So really all that's left now is to do the final details. Got my super teeny tiny brush and I use fresh gouache straight from the tube to add the light lines on the mask. And I like to use it straight from the tube because even though gouache is technically opaque, it is most opaque the thicker and fresher it is. And with this dark background, I really want that white to pop. And so the more, I guess, pure I can get it, the more it's going to pop. And I don't have this sketched here, I'm just eyeballing it. And when you use white gouache to add shine to a piece, it's best to do it on areas that are dark in value. So for example, if I go put that white gouache on the yellow bits, it's not going to show up very well. But by putting it on obsidian brown or even on the purple, it will show up much better and be far more effective. Now, of course, that doesn't mean don't put it on lighter areas. I added it to the eyes and it looks quite good there. And as the gouache dries, sometimes it kind of gets lost, a little too pale. Just go over it again with another, well, it's not really a wash, but another line of the gouache. And then I'm adding little dots near, well, the dots. So any of those dark details I have, I'm now adding some shine just to call it out a bit better. And going in with more details. And sometimes I smudge things with my fingers if I feel like things are looking a little too clean. So this part of the mask is lighter, but a little more yellowed. So I've grabbed my white gouache and mixed a little bit of that cadmium yellow with it. Now, when I do mix my gouache, I usually do it on a scrap piece of paper. That way I'm not contaminating my watercolor palette. It's amazing how little bits of, like just the little dots of gouache can really help a piece pop. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, press like so I know to make more like it. And if you have any suggestions that you want to see me paint, please let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for new subjects. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!